live December 11th, 2024. This is the IPS Evening Deprogram. And I think I have a title for tonight's live stream. The War on Perception. Kind of generic, but it kind of encapsulates what we're going to be talking about tonight. Although it's open topics. So let's just give a second for the raft to assemble. This is Lucifer Tim. And we're going to just go ahead and start with phones open. 505-510-4226. So if you have any constructive criticism, comments, complaints, intel, puzzle pieces on this multi-million piece puzzle, feel free to call in. Infinite Plane Radio points of interest for this evening. Drones from Iran. The problem with simulation theory as an explanation for fake news. And I'll be quick about this one. We may not even have to go there. But I'll concede one thing. You can believe we're in a simulation. You can believe in God. But you cannot use the simulation, or God, as an explanation for what we see in fake news, for predictive programming, for eerie coincidences. We have to go ahead and stick with the earthly, mundane, worldly, prosaic answers before we reach for the divine. So we don't need to debate whether or not this is a simulation or a simulation created by God. We just need to focus on objective reality. I feel like the conversation strays outside of our purview, and we're here to demystify media, and we're doing a fine job as a think tank in doing just that without falling for any of these traps. InfoWars snatched back from the jaws of the onion, and AutoHoaxCon number 3. That will be on Saturn Day. So in about 2.5 days, we're going to have AutoHoaxCon number 3. And these are conferences that are meant to be a way to gather those who would be interested in a convention. Because we're going to do a convention. We're going to do AutoHoax Convention, AutoHoaxCon. These conferences are, again, just intermediary steps. So we can ensure that we have the number of speakers, that we're all on the same sheet. You have to be AutoHoax compliant to be one of our speakers. We're not trying to open the doors to conspiracy claptrap. It's not a big tent. We don't want chemtrail alarmists disturbing the tranquility of our ataraxia. I mean, we are a philosophical organization. We're not engaged in info war. You're not going to find any Kool-Aid here. This isn't an Alex Jonestown cult. All right, joined by X322, Gematria 101, Diana South, Roxy W, Shed Dog, AJ206, and Esteban. So Shed Dog, I checked, and the person in question is not a troll. Trolls don't do deep research, and this person is very well researched, not just in the realm of autohoaxology. So you're going to have to get your Shieldar checked, because you're not dealing, or Trolldar, because it's an actual person with, I would say, some pretty deep set convictions with regard to their views that they've expressed. And as I said, you can believe in anything, your higher power, whatever you want to call it, but we can separate that from our analysis of the news. Lean Dion says, a debate or discussion with JLB on programming versus divine channeling sync would be interesting. Yeah, I think it would be too. We're kind of having that debate now, informally, but in person it would be great. See, in my opinion, the mystified explanation of the news is a misdirection tactic, cognitive sabotage, and it's one of the final guardrails. If you can get past the bloody guardrail, and most synchro mystics have, although some of them still believe people are dying, if you can get past the bloody guardrail, you'll see it's all Heinz 57, like the kind that JFK put on himself when he faked his death 2 months before the assassination, according to that article in Vanity Fair. Yep, JFK was staging his own assassination for fun under the direction of Jackie, who was filming it. But if you can get past that, the premise that people die in fake news events, that's a big one. You jump that hurdle, the final hurdle is who's responsible for the synchronization of messaging in entertainment media and future news. Seems like it's magic or some kind of supernatural phenomenon going on, because how can they possibly predict the future? How could all these people know? Well, those are the wrong questions. Those questions assume randomness where it is not random. It assumes that you're looking at separate entities when it is in fact monolithic, as I can prove, as we often prove. And one major premise that I think sets us apart from those who just analyze news from that perspective, the mystic explanation or the universe is doing stuff, is by beginning with the premise that everything is done by man. I think we do a better job at reverse engineering it and finding answers. And I think one of the answers we've come across is the answer to the question, why? What's the point? What's the point of all these weird little clues and Easter eggs in the movies? And I think the simplest explanation suffices here. It's propaganda. It's meant to condition us. It's meant to steer us towards conclusions, which is what propaganda is. But specifically with regard to simulated news events scheduled for the future. Nothing mystical about scheduling things. It's like scheduling movies. But instead of scheduling movies, they schedule drills, simulations. And these simulated news events are performed for the purposes of manipulating our collective worldview. These are contemporary myths, but these psyops that we talk about all the time are the instances where media is lying. And just like a good liar can lie strategically and steer somebody down a different path, we are collectively listening to the lies. It's all integrated, and we consistently demonstrate this. And I want to take this further, but I feel like we have to get rid of old explanations that no longer suffice so we can liberate who knows how many hundreds or thousands of people who would otherwise be caught up in alt media conversations about the deep state and the cabal and who do we vote for. Those are a waste of time. That's all InfoWar stuff. And I believe that we've managed to get past these explanations that mystify rather than elucidate. And we are here to shine a light. All right, joined by Greg R. Lesko says, hello, Rafters, ears up. Nicholas Pitts says, Jaron and company are on their way to Antarctica. Yeah, Jaron and Witsit Gets It and McToon, they're going down to Antarctica to experience a 24-hour sun. I'm pretty sure this is some kind of reality TV show. It might even be like Behind the Curve Part 2. 900 Shed Dog says, I believe the Luigi hoax was done so that they can get Congress to pass legislation to protect healthcare officials and executives. It's clear their day is coming. This is a preemptive move. Could be. I think it's pretty certain that it was a hoax. You're right about that. And once you get past it, real or fake, because I don't start with that premise. I'm fake until proven real. And it has all the indicators of being a hoax. But when you begin with it being a hoax, you have to ask, well, what's the utility of it? And the utility is pretty obvious. It's agitating the left. It's setting the premise, kill the rich. It's setting the premise that there's a systemic failure in our system to care for the oppressed or for the working class. It's all just psyop entertainment. You know, it's meant to provoke, which it's doing. Okay, and as far as the predictive programming basis for this character, it keeps expanding, and I think we've been right about everything. In fact, I had even said in one of my comments that, you know, I compared him to, of course, Joker, but through Joker you get Taxi Driver, because it's the same character. And I think it was the Hollywood Reporter did a story on him, and they compared him to Travis Bickle. Yeah, a Hollywood Reporter. You can imagine a Hollywood version of the story. Smart Ivy League graduate in chronic pain due to an injury becomes frustrated with Americans' privatized healthcare and decides to murder the CEO, striking a blow against a soulless insurance company. Sure, he went too far, but it would play out like a dark character portrait Taxi Driver for the social media age. So there you have it, Taxi Driver. When the story first broke, I said Joker, I said Robin Hood, Taxi Driver, Riddler. We were bringing up all the different characteristics that I think were being drawn from media to create this composite character. And so this is a good example of why they do predictive programming. If you related to the Joker, and the first one in particular, the class struggle, kill the rich, if you took his side, like you're led to, then you would easily identify with this individual. So these instances of predictive programming, movies about terrorism that foreshadow terroristic events, they're getting you to react to something in advance, to solidify your opinions in advance. So you're very decisive. You believe it when you see it on the news, and you form your opinions along those grounds that you've been steered. And they've made it acceptable for people to take the side of the killer, to laud the killer. Apparently, women love him. He's got fans. And this isn't new. I mean, women were drooling over the Night Stalker, who was creeping around California, raping and killing people. And I believe he got married and probably impregnated some people while he was in jail. Even Charles Manson had some goth girlfriend on his way out. Just insane. And it's insane because it's not real. He's just an actor. But it reveals something. That people would sign off on the death of a CEO because they saw something on TV that convinced them that it's okay. Or they hear other people saying it's okay. But the floodgates are open and people are expressing themselves honestly. So just take note of the sociopaths in your circle. Copaesthetic says, Jaron and company probably filming Space Cadets 2. Well, they're not as excited as I thought they would be. If somebody bought me a $30,000 ticket to Antarctica, I would be live streaming, I'd be talking about it, but they're kind of morose. Like they're on the way to a funeral. Like they're going to bury their flat earth. And that's not exactly how to look at this. We've been wrong. Every one of us, we were all wrong at some point. We're still wrong all the time. We don't have all the answers. And the point of a model is to be the best possible explanation for what you're observing. And if that model falls short, you have to adapt. And many people prematurely attach themselves to a model without insisting on exploration. That's why it's 2024 and not 2015 when they're doing this. Like, what took them so long? To our credit, we were already getting behind efforts to make this trip back in 2020 before the lockdowns kind of took the wind out of our sails. Lucid Stream says psyops reveal people's true nature. Yeah, it also reveals the apathy, which is sort of healthy in a way because you shouldn't care, but they don't care about stuff they believe is real. I don't care about these things either, but I know they're fake. So our not caring is qualitatively different. Like mine is nicer, kinder. Like I don't care because I know it's not something to care about. They don't care because they've been rendered apathetic. They've been rendered what we call, the blue pill consensus trance. They're just nullified. This is why people use the phrase NPCs somewhat derisively. Because the wokesters and the truthers can't figure out, why won't these people activate? Can't they see we're being chemtrailed? Can't they see the ocean levels are rising? Can't they see children are being killed in classrooms in an epidemic of mass shootings? They don't understand. Those on the fringe don't understand why the normies don't get agitated. What they don't get either, though, is that their intensified agitation at the fringe just means they're deeper into the programming. You're better off, honestly, with the blue pill. The stress levels are deadly in themselves. All right, Estevan is here. Peter Territory says, 28 years later trailer is out. Oh, yes, I had that yesterday. I didn't get to it, but the 28 days later trailer was something we wanted to look at because 28 days later ties this idea together, the whole rage virus, the apes, ties into Neuralink and Musk, and many other examples we could bring up of the introduction of this particular set of, concepts they've grouped, which is the rage virus that you catch through the screen. There's the disease X, as I have been referring to it. If you can post the link to it, I'll find it here in a moment if you don't. There was something important here. Oh, yes, someone had mentioned this. There was some more, I don't spend a lot of time doing gematria, but patterns are patterns, and the people that run this place, whatever you want to define them as, do have an obsession with numbers and patterns. And we have another example here. So Jurassic Liars called in last night, and he talked about how the shooter went to a McDonald's with the address that has a 407, that the hotel had 47 stories, and these he related to Trump, and that Trump had given his acceptance speech at that hotel. Well, there's more to it. The shooting came 47 days before the inauguration, of the 47th CEO of the United States, which will be, of course, Trump. So 47 days before the inauguration, the shooting happens, 47th president, hotel, 47 stories, and he gets caught at the McDonald's, 407 in the address. And that McDonald's would also correlate to Trump himself and also some of the clown imagery. It's all in there. Very succinct, in fact. Okay, let's look at that 28 days later trailer, years later. What will humanity become? Alex Garland. Now, Alex Garland wrote this, and he directed Civil War. And Civil War has the same idea. It's the right-wingers, their rage virus, the Civil War, is all based on their hatred of media, etc. So I'm looking at Teletubbies. It began, this is interesting here, the number, 1,228 days ago. I don't want to get a copyright strike, but I'm just going to scroll through it to look for the imagery. And there's a movie coming out here soon called Homesteader, I believe. And it has, I think it's Los Angeles getting the nuke. So that's coming up in about 9 days. So maybe it's coming. Okay, this looks good. 28 days later, this summer. I'll watch the trailer here in its entirety when I'm not live, but I'm going to bookmark it. Released in the summer solstice, says Isabel Ann. Lean Dion says 286 number blowing up as well. Viral tweet focusing on it to push more simulation. Yeah, let's talk about simulation theory for a minute because, again, I will concede this one point, and this is at the end of a lot of conversation. You can believe that we live in a dream, in a simulation. You can have that as your personal belief. But you can't say that something anomalous in the news is caused by it, because you would therefore be invoking the divine fallacy, unless you have proof. And that's what I'm asking. Like, what is your evidence of the higher power at work in news media, or God, or whatever? And if your evidence is, oh, the Netflix movie White Noise came out before Palestine, Ohio had a train derailment, just like the movie, and many of the extras were involved in the evacuations. Well, then your contention is that God or a higher power did the Netflix movie or inspired it. And that's tantamount to saying that media is divinely inspired. And so that gets into a kind of an area where I don't think we're being objective anymore, especially when you're overlooking the more mundane explanation, which you have to address first, which is man. Simple Occam's razor, I call it maybe Bigfoot logic, where someone inserts the impossible into the realm of possibilities so they can say maybe this. They're trying to shoehorn in ambiguity where we don't need it. We don't need confusion. We don't need ambiguity. We need answers because we've been fed nothing but confusion and ambiguity our entire lives. So here we are specifically seeking to form a parallel media based on having answers and a firm grasp of what we're looking at, and a methodology for processing news media without any of the intentional confusion and cognitive sabotage, because there is a war on perception right now. And I'm not going to be submerged in their dis and malinformation campaigns. So the idea of maybe Bigfoot logic is you go out into the woods camping and you have two people. One person believes in Bigfoot, the other doesn't. They both hear something in the woods. So what is it on a multiple choice? Squirrel, deer, or Bigfoot? Well, the person who believes in Bigfoot is going to say Bigfoot. The person who knows Bigfoot has never been demonstrated to exist is going to say squirrel or deer. Are they both equally right? No, Bigfoot doesn't even belong on the multiple choice because it hasn't been determined to exist in the first place. So it doesn't belong there. It's a non sequitur. So there's this point I'm making here, which is we cannot insert into our possible explanations for anything that we see. We cannot insert God, artificial intelligence, the devil, until you can demonstrate these things exist. And then if that is your claim, you kind of have to own it. So then we can point out, well, which specific instance was the result of this higher power? Because that would be mind expanding. We would be able to prove to people that there is a higher power without using a Bible, just using Netflix. And I think that's a very big claim. So I think we should keep that claim in its proper place. Diana South says, green hats, Joker hair, maybe the novel pink hats. Oh, yes, the pink hats with the cat ears. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. The green hats, the Luigi hats, are likely emblematic of the Joker's army, where they all wear the clown masks. And of course, the green hair, which also comports with some of the other green hair things we were looking at this summer, like when Beetlejuice 2 came out alongside Joker 2. Beetlejuice had the green hair. And then the shooter, the second shooter, Ryan Routh, had the yellow and blue hair, which of course gives you the green. Someone had pointed out that the manifesto written on the bullets was a very Riddler type of move. And I have to agree with that. So we often talk about Stanley Kubrick and predictive programming. And last week I did a review of A Clockwork Shining about how there's this misinterpretation about what Kubrick was doing. That he wasn't revealing stuff. He's not a whistleblower, but he's a propagandist and a metascripter. Well, interestingly enough, Joe Rogan was in a conversation with Quentin Tarantino about Eyes Wide Shut and how they changed it in order to cover up what he was trying to reveal. Let me play a clip.
Like, his films are so different. And he was a weird guy, too. He did, like, complex mathematics in his spare time.
I just pulled my script from Eyes Wide Shut. I had a script that was from set, and I was reading it over the weekend, and I saw that it has this... I mean, I've known this for a long time, but...
This is Roger Avery, and he's telling Rogan and Quentin that the real script of Eyes Wide Shut was about a cult, like basically QAnon type stuff, and that the truth of it was taken out of the movie after Kubrick was killed, and they managed to bury it. Now, this is an interesting subtext, and it's really impossible to deny. You had some pretty blatant examples of this in the movie. The costume shop under the rainbow, the little girl being obviously sold to these older men by her father. That was all there. There's quite a lot there. Even at the end, there's indication that the parents give away the girl to these old men. And the weird teddy bear stuff. And Kubrick was involved in that movie AI before he died, which had some similar aspects to it regarding the children and objectification and this sick undertone that you see in Eyes Wide Shut. But my only point in bringing this up is that people will talk about Kubrick all day long and describe him as some kind of a whistleblower. Truthers really favor this. They think he was trying to tell us something. And this is a huge misdirection, and I'd almost consider this to be a limited hangout. Because the people who look at this and dig into his movies never connect his movies with the future. They only connect the movies with the past and what he reveals. They don't see the predictive value in these films. And it's a matter of record now. It's not a theory. We have so many examples at this point that those who don't know what predictive programming is just aren't aware. And the fact of it is, it's intrinsic to what media is. Just like media is consistently infused with fakery, you could say that the fakery is systemic. You could also say that predictive programming is structural. It's part of what media is. It's a way that they prepare us for the future. It's the way they shape our perceptions. It's an ongoing perception management influence operation. It never ends. But Kubrick is just one. It's like to focus on Kubrick is to really miss the forest here for the trees. So Kubrick's great to study, but it's important not to overly emphasize him. Just like too many people focus on one particular psyop or one particular shooting. It's like, no, you have to look at the whole picture. Lucid Stream says, Homesteader's likely going to agitate the preppers. Yeah, it's targeted at preppers. Shed Dog says, how do we demonstrate higher dimensional entities existing in lower densities when they cannot directly materialize? Well, that's been a problem for religious people forever. You just got to fake it, I guess. But if you can't prove it, then why would you try to bring it into the conversation? And we're trying to keep our conversation on media analysis and describing what media is. And the wrong explanations that we confront are the explanations that have held people in Trutherville. You got the guardrails, the bloody guardrail, and the mystic guardrail. Okay, let us continue. I was going to play a few more seconds of it. This is Joe Rogan and his guest, Roger Avery, talking about Kubrick trying to blow the whistle, but they managed to shut him up.
And they never take their eyes off their daughter until the moment they take their eyes off and the final line of the movie is coming up. You see those two guys walking off with the daughter. They're taking her away. They've given their daughter to the pedo cult. That's what's happened at the end of the movie. And there's an incident where when they first screened the movie in England, people who were outside, this is all secondhand, by the way. There were people who were outside of the theater who could hear inside of the theater Kubrick yelling at all the executives and saying, "It's my movie."
So apparently there was some kind of narration that was supposed to go along with the movie that was stripped out of it. So we didn't get the full version, is his contention here. But there are many indications that Kubrick didn't die when they said he did. That was a staged exit. And in all likelihood, he was still alive when 9/11 happened. He was probably there live directing his magnum opus because he was one of the design authority. When I say metascriptors, we could be saying the strangers, like in Dark City, or the design authority in Megalopolis. They exist. And any sort of incredulity about, faking news or pre-writing history in advance, all you have to do is point out any simulation, any mass casualty simulation involving hundreds of participants, involving law enforcement, hospitals. If you look at how big these events are that are routinely performed all the time, these things are very common. That's all you're talking about. You're talking about simulated events. But the difference between a simulated mass casualty event and the real thing on the news, or the thing on the news, is that one is portrayed as real. So it's all just context. What I try to emphasize here is that the scale of fakery is far greater than the truthers ever were really allowed to think. This is gate-kept information. So right now, breaking drone invasion. Tonight, over 100 cities have reported coordinated drones flying over the city the size of school buses. Laura Loomer says, when will the civilians start shooting down the drones in New Jersey? Florida man shoots a Walmart delivery drone with a pistol and jokes with officers that he can't breathe. So this drone thing is getting out of hand for a few reasons. People are calling in reports of drones for regular airplanes. And a lot of people are just clickbaiting the situation. It doesn't matter to people that they're lying. I mean, truthers are among the biggest liars on the internet. It's pretty sad. But the drone story is pretty big. And there's more rumors and fake examples than real drones. But that doesn't stop people from spreading this thing. Laura Loomer said, did you know that there are assassin drones? What's the likelihood that Iran and China are flying assassination drones over Jersey to geotrack so they can map out and extract tracking locations to assassinate the president? There's Laura Loomer again. But listen to this. This was on Fox this morning, where Congressman Jeff Van Drew says that Iran has a mothership off the East Coast, and that they are the ones sending drones over New Jersey.
In focus now, Republican Congressman Jeff Van Drew of New Jersey, member of the House Judiciary Committee on the Hill right now. How do you address this at this point?
Well, here's the real deal, Harris. I'm also on the Transportation Committee, on the Aviation Subcommittee, and I've gotten to know people. And from very high sources, very qualified sources, very responsible sources, I'm going to tell you the real deal. Iran launched a mothership probably about a month ago that contains these drones. That mothership is off, I'm going to tell you the deal. It's off the east coast of the United States.
So they're Iranian drones, which is good. It means they're not demons, because aliens are demons, if you're keeping up with the news. So this is some kind of invasion of drones, or invasion by Iran, but it's drones. And some are reportedly the size of cars and buses.
Some really glorified hobbyists that were doing something unbelievable. They don't have the technology. But let's pretend that's possible. The third possibility was somebody, an adversarial country, doing this. Know that Iran made a deal with China to purchase drones, motherships, and technology in order to go forward.
Okay, Iran and China. Okay, this is a continuing story. I believe the Pentagon has denied this, but that doesn't matter. This is getting extremely hyped.
The spy balloon. Congressman, this is serious.
We've got to bring them down, and we've got to find a way to bring them down.
She even brings up the notion that we don't know what's in them, and if we shoot them, they could explode.
Where some of these drones in New Jersey have been seen. That capability exists. It's possible some of those drones are here. So I have two questions. How are they fueling them? They have to land somewhere. Drones don't fly forever. Why don't they close down the airspace? Yes, it's inconvenient. Yes, it's the holiday.
Anyway, she's convinced that these things are going to start exploding. World Stage says, watch out for the Chinese drones. Richie from Boston. All right, let's move on. This drone paranoia story, though, is growing, so we'll keep an eye on it. Here's Mel Gibson, went to Mar-a-Lago, and he's a QAnon hero. And he is warning of Marxism and blood-drinking Kabbalists, or the cabal of blood drinkers. They're just trying to bring back a lot of this Q hysteria. So it's not going away, sadly. You know, I was hoping that Q would kind of fade out of just embarrassment, but no, it's sticking around. And these celebrities like Mel Gibson keep it going.
Endured 4 years of thinly veiled Marxism. And, now I think what we have is a 4-year grace period. But we have to...
Okay, anyway, this is Mel Gibson. What he says here, I have 9 kids. If one of them got stolen, I'd have to kill someone. So you got...
we have to work hard.
We have some tough talk. And his involvement with Q is also because of his association with Jim Caviezel, as Gibson directed Passion of the Christ, and Caviezel was the one in Sound of Freedom, where he played the role of human trafficker Tim Ballard, who pretended to be stopping human traffickers in real life, and then made a documentary about it. Then it was revealed it was all a hoax. But what wasn't a hoax is that he was, ironically, a human trafficker.
If one of them got stolen or trafficked or something, I'd have to kill someone.
So we can say the lefties are crazy because they're bloodthirsty and they want to kill CEOs, but the right-wingers, they want to kill Democrats. They want to kill celebrities. They want to kill Tom Hanks. They cheer for this stuff. So both sides are bloodthirsty and crazy. Howard Boyd says, go ahead, Timmy, buddy, talk. Yeah, thank you for joining, Howard Boyd. And by the way, phones are open. Roxy said, last I heard, drones are USA looking for nuclear or biological weapons. I think that Mick West. Yeah, Mick West had done a pretty good breakdown of a lot of these claims. And he said that if you can't provide your location, the time, and the direction, your claim should just be ignored. And that makes a lot of sense. You have to recognize that there are more bad claims than good claims, more with lower standards. You have to have some vetting process. And this is why I make it a point to point out the logical fallacies that hold up various conspiracy theories. And then I insist that we don't give these conspiracy theories a pass. Because if you were to say, hey, look, we don't have a lot of people on our side right now. Can we just open up the tent here and let the chemtrail people in and some Mandela affected people in? I would say no, because we will be outnumbered by people who accept bad claims, who make bad claims and don't know why. And, you can believe these things, but you have to provide evidence for it. You can't just use the same old bad claims, arguments from incredulity, loaded questions, appeals to ad populum. No, we can't have that. So we want to rule these things out. Okay, let's continue. This is Mel Gibson again. He said he would kill somebody. Mel Gibson made he didn't make the film Sound of Freedom. But here he is promoting it. He says, don't miss it. It's vital to understand our crisis. So he was someone who helped hype this movie. And this movie was sold through hype.
One of the most disturbing problems in our world today is human trafficking, and particularly the trafficking of children. Now, the first step in eradicating this crime is awareness. Go see Sound of Freedom.
Okay, Sound of Freedom. And the company Angel bought out theaters that were empty, and they made it look like more people watched it than really did. I think it was a huge hoax. I watched it. It was terrible. And I also want to point out that it's a pretty watered down version of the original promise of QAnon. They were all about saving the children back in 2016, 2017, and they would make these claims about children in underground bases being kept for the purposes of satanic ritual sacrifice. You know, totally believable stuff. Yet none of those children were ever liberated. Not when Trump got into office, not when he got out, not when he got back in right now. Nobody's talking about those children. And I've always asked them, I said, what about the children that you were trying to save originally? Jim Caviezel's little expeditions are a drop in the bucket compared to what you were originally claiming was the scope of the problem that you were going to solve, which they haven't. And it's been long enough that a lot of those children have grown up, raised by the deep state, probably voting Democrat. So too late to save them. What's up, Ready or Not 31? Thank you for joining. Tonight's points of interest: drones from Iran. InfoWars snatched back from The Onion. And I have this, I guess I called it here, the problem with simulation theory as an explanation for fake news. So again, if you're a simulationist, you can still believe in that if you choose to, but you can't use it as an explanation for anomalies that we see in the news, for fake news events. It's one of these explanations that has sufficed for too long. So here's the literal simulation claim. Many simulation theorists believe that we're inside of a video game. And when they see eerie coincidences that connect fake news to entertainment media, they see it as evidence that nothing is real, that we're in a video game. So in this view, reality is fake. Therefore, all news is technically fake. And if all news is fake, whether it's real news or psyop theater, then no news is real in this sense. So in a simulation, there's no meaningful distinction between real and fake news. That's one of my problems with it. What's the point? What's the difference? Like the Mandela effect. If that's true and we're in a simulation, then why do I care if nobody died at this event? Because tomorrow it might be 10 people died. It could change. If we're eradicating one objective reality from the equation, then there is no real against which something else can be considered fake. You have to have a real to call something fake. But if we're eradicating that standard, then everything is equally untrue. The simulation as a metaphor for the mental model. This is where I'm at. I do argue that we live in a mental simulation, and our map of the world is a simulation in that sense. But furthermore, I contend that the model of the world the consensus shares is a simulation that doesn't match the terrain. Not in every way. It does in the limited sense of what you see around the world. What you directly experience for the most part is going to match. But this internal simulation is the target of all their psyops, and they insert simulated events. Similar to how fake news gets added into our history. So if you think about 100 fake news stories that are treated as real, it becomes part of our shared history. So our history is no longer pure. It's no longer objective truth. There's some contamination. Similarly, these simulated events contaminate your internal model. So do you accept the God construct of the atomic bomb? Do you believe those are real? Do you believe that there are jihadi terrorists that might blow up in a Jewish deli screaming Allah Akbar, necessitating the TSA? Do you believe in mass school shootings? And if so, what's your basis? Well, in all likelihood, it's what you saw on TV. And these things definitely add to your experience, things that you cannot verify, but they do change your opinions They change your sense of threat. Truthers, every red pill they take is another hyperstition. Oh, now this pill, now I'm afraid of 5G towers. Now I'm afraid of clouds. Now I'm afraid of immigrants. Now I'm afraid of aliens. You have all these things that they pack in, which explains why they're so agitated. Simulation theory argues that the physical world is a literal simulation, though. But the evidence supports my contention. The evidence is the world exists. Although our internal concept may not match it because of media manipulation. But, and this is a key point, and this is where I think people fall for the trick. The discovery that news is fake should not lead you to conclude that the real world is fake. Glitches in the news, weird coincidences, shouldn't make you think that the real world is somehow glitchy. The conflating of the mental simulation with the real thing is how they screw you up. And this is, I think, a huge part of the design of this thing. Merging fiction and news, merging your internal concept of the world with the real thing, confusing the map with the territory when they've given you an augmented map. So our news is infused with simulation, simulated events. This doesn't mean the real world is a simulation. Like the Mandela effect, it relies on subjectivism being the ultimate truth, where nothing is true and nothing is false. And in this view, the distinctions we make between real and fake news are rendered meaningless. So Occam's razor. There's no evidence we live in a simulation other than the indications people point to in mass media. So simulation theory largely rests on misattributing the cause of media manipulation to a higher power, to the programmer of the video game that we live in. So we're all looking at the same evidence, but we're attributing it to a different cause. So the Occam's razor question, what is more likely? Media is being manipulated by man to control the minds of man, or nothing is real, and that a higher power reveals itself in Hollywood movies and government propaganda, corporate news media. Like, what's more likely? Like the Mandela effect, simulation theory is just an explanation for glitches in the propaganda matrix, but both lack evidence. The claim that they're making that certain scenes in these movies represent a higher power inserting prophetic Easter eggs into films, this claim is essentially saying that they're seeing the hand of God in these Netflix productions. And this would also, this is a huge claim to make, but it would also say that Netflix has better evidence for the existence of a higher power than even the Bible. If you could with a straight face say, hey, this thing I saw in this movie, which relates to this news event, suggests that reality isn't real, it's all a simulation. To me, that's very weak evidence, and it's the wrong conclusion. So, simple Occam's razor, what's more likely? Do we live in a government-directed propaganda matrix that creates a false worldview? Or is God revealing himself through television programming? So what's the point of this? My argument here is that sim theory and the Mandela effect are attacks on cognition disguised as a new philosophy. It undermines one's ability to see the fake and separate it from the real, because it replaces an objective analysis with relativism and subjectivism, which fly in the face of objective reality. And without objective reality, distinctions between real and fake news are meaningless. So that's pretty much my breakdown of why I think that it's not a valid explanation for fake news events, but I do concede if you believe that we live in a dream, a simulation, or something, that's fine, but it's outside the purview of this discussion. But I think it's great. I think it's great that there are simulationists. Although, I think it's more of a religion. It's more of a religious proposition. I'd even say that Mandela effect is paranormal. Like, these aren't serious scientific claims with a falsifiable model, because there's nothing you can say that would falsify simulation theory for someone who believes it, because they can always expand it, and they have no there's no solid model that they have that they can stand by that can then be tested. It's almost like, in a sense, it's more of a theological proposition than anything. So I kind of think it's just a replacement for God, and that might even be its design. That's why I say it's the divine fallacy. But like the angels having been replaced with aliens, well, simulation or AI could just be replacing God. Lieutenant Weinberg says, this has been a boring PSYOP year after the fake earshot. Nothing has happened since this weak CEO PSYOP. Lucid Stream says, sim theory is 100% scientific. All quantum mechanic experiments can be tested. Well, simulation theory uses the language of science, but it's not scientific in the sense that it's not actually a theory. It's kind of a theory has to explain some phenomenon and be the best explanation, or at least an attempt. But what does it attempt to explain? I think it's a description of things, and I think it's just a new way of describing older mystic explanations for the world. But no one has any evidence that there is a simulation or that we're inside of a video game. And there have been many debates on the matter, and many mathematicians have confronted this. There's a lot of deep thinkers on the matter. And I've read some fascinating refutations on a purely logical basis that rule out the idea that we're in a big computer. I think it's largely, again, it's a theological proposition, and I think it rightly belongs to the realm of paranormal and mysticism. It's not a scientific proposition, and it's not a serious claim, or it's not a serious, I don't think, anyway. It's not a serious competitor for explaining what we're seeing. To say it's all simulation, it doesn't really satisfy any of the questions that we raise here every day. For example, my question here, what's more likely? Is man manipulating man, or is there a higher power here? Simulation theory is like a lazy explanation, but it ignores the evidence that we provide. And I only bring it up because it has been the go-to de facto explanation since 9/11. And I think it's like the Mandela effect. I think some people want to think that they have this tangible evidence of God. It's miraculous. And I don't want to be the God blocker, as they call me, with regard to the Mandela effect. But unfortunately, I have to. I have to, because I think we've moved past this explanation. But I'm willing to debate the subject. I didn't know that there were actual simulation theorists out there, other than Ronnie and Johnny, out there with their flat Earth simulation map. But yeah, apparently a lot of people, more than I thought, do take this very seriously. And that's why they arrive at synchro mysticism. Okay, let's move on. But again, my final word on this topic, because I think it's a diversion. My final word on it is that the best we can offer you, or those who are insistent upon it, the best we can offer is that, yes, you can believe we're in a simulation, but no, you can't use that as an explanation for anything that we're experiencing here. I would also argue that it represents an attempt to guardrail what we're doing. Think about this. The IPS is the only think tank on the internet, the only one, that are analyzing media fakery and news bending, metascript analysis. We're the only ones doing this without leaning into supernatural explanations that mystify and occult the truth. And I'd like to point out, too, that the biggest proponents of simulation theory today would be Elon Musk and Joe Rogan. So I don't want whatever they're taking. And the fact that they're popularizing it makes me think it's mind war ammunition, cognitive sabotage. And again, it doesn't offer any explanation for anything. It's just a way of misdescribing things. And, I understand it, though. I understand that it feels succinct, but I would actually say it's kind of empty, like Mandela effects. People will say, I have this memory of this thing, but you ask for anything beyond a surface claim that they have this memory, there's nothing. Millions of people claim they saw Sinbad in a genie movie. but nobody remembers the basic plot. Nobody remembers any of the big scenes. Nobody could recreate the movie. So it's a very shallow claim. And when it comes to the simulation theory, it's not really satisfying. Like I said, it's more of a, it's not a complete theory. I mean, unless I can be proven wrong. Lucid Stream says, altered states of consciousness can give you a glimpse of what lies outside the simulation. Sometimes minds need to be bent. Our brains and central nervous systems are similar to guardrails. Interesting. I've heard that before. But what I haven't heard is I haven't heard from somebody who's gone outside of the sim with drugs come back and say anything all that profound. I mean, Joe Rogan's done it. What does he always talk about? DMT, mushrooms, ayahuasca. And I never see these people coming back from their drug trips and totally breaking down media, totally breaking down the propaganda in the way that our think tank has. And we've done so without psychedelics. So I even question whether the transcendence offered by drugs is anything more than just getting high. I don't know if it's truly seeing outside of a matrix. You know, I mean, I remember listening to a podcast by this individual who talked about how when he took acid, he went out of his body and he went to Venus and he looked at Earth from Venus and there's the sun and galaxies. And he was describing how he was basically like an astronaut flying through space. And at the time, I was kind of thinking, was there anybody before the Copernican revolution, were there any instances of people experimenting with drugs or priesthoods who could describe the universe accurately in this way? Or was this just his imagination running with his preconceived notions? And that's kind of what I think. Lean Dion says, that's why Elon's rockets and Starman look fake. It's simulation. It's a good theory. That could explain it. Like once you get past this Kármán line, once you get into space, it's all pixels. It's all Minecraft. It explains the glitchiness and the fakery in the NASA productions. Lieutenant Weinberg says, I don't know about the double slit. Yeah, I think that might even be a misconception. A lot of people talk about the double slit experiment and that the perceiver is affecting whether it's a wave or a particle. And I think that's a misinterpretation of the experiment itself. Eccentric View says there is no outer space. Well, if you can't demonstrate curve, then you can't immediately assert that the Earth is a discrete object floating in space. So space would then have to be ruled out as a surrounding empty field and that we're in it somehow. But rather space is a description of just up. Because if the Earth is a stationary plane, there is an up and down. If Earth is a ball floating through space, then it's all sort of relative. Lucid Stream says, Musk and Rogan are 100% gatekeepers. Do not trust them. Yes. Yes, they're gate-kept and gatekeepers. But Trutherville will always default to these two. Okay, let's continue. I was accused today of being a big chemtrail shill. Yeah, I'm a shill for big chemtrail. So Ben Lightened is a guy on Twitter who is always posting pictures of cirrus clouds, which he finds to be terrifying. You know, those persistent condensation trails behind airplanes that are totally predictable. And just so you know, the fact that condensation trails are predictable means that contrail theory, or it's not even a theory, but the contrail explanation makes more sense and is far more valid than the chemtrail theory, because there's no chemtrail theorists out there who can predict when they will happen. So predictability automatically discredits them. They don't have predictability. Contrails are 100% predictable. This is not new. They've been predictable since the 50s. The Air Force had done a lot of research on the matter so that they could avoid creating these trails. Because these trails are not the result of a spray despite what chemtrail alarmists will tell you. It's not a spray. What are they spraying is a loaded question. But here's what he wrote. He said, okay, yeah, millions of people are just imagining this. And he has a picture of persistent condensation trails. Now, it's not a coincidence that we're in the winter and these are persisting. But in his view, this is sky poison. And I said, no, they're not imagining it. They're misidentifying it. This is the basic fact of it is we all see these lines, but the conspiracy theorists see poison. Those who are not conspiracy theorists, who are a little more researched, know the cause of these things. So then he asked me, he said, well, you must be a paid shill. How many hours a week do you spend doing this? Because I do often spend time debunking chemtrails. But that's just because these things are all over X. You know, I don't get a lot of traction on X, but if I was pushing chemtrails, I would. This is something they want you to believe in. But I get accused of working for the airlines. So I said, yeah, sure, I get cheap flights and an extra pack of peanuts by all the airlines. They appreciate my work because I help them to continue to spray the masses with AIDS. Like, that's kind of what he's looking for. Like, he thinks he caught somebody who's trying to help the airlines. But I continue the conversation and I ask him, you know, where's your mask? Like, if you truly believe that these are poisons, where's your mask? Like, I think that's a valid question. But our conversation went nowhere. I was just accused of, he says, you're obviously paid to do this. He was kind of interrogating me. Okay, I'm catching up. Let's see what's up on your comments here. Lucid Stream says space junk equals false beliefs. Yeah, space junk is another one of these threats, a hyperstition. They didn't exist 10 years ago. It was a hypothetical, but now they're real and people's homes are getting hit. Okay, let's move on. I'm just blown away by X. It's just a cesspool of mis and malinformation. If you don't have discernment on X, it could drive you crazy. And a lot of people have been driven crazy. I mean, this is mind war, and it's not just mainstream media. The alternative media and the mainstream media are both the interface of the mind war. It doesn't matter if you're main or alt. You're being targeted both ways. Like, the audiences are the target, is what I mean. The consumers of the media are the target, and alt media is targeting those who see through the mainstream. But it's not doing people a favor. It's not about informing you. It's about conforming you. Okay, drones from Iran. We covered this. By the way, I have a new domain, infiniteplane.live. I used to own this one. I picked it up again. Infiniteplane.live will take you directly to the current live stream. Okay, fact check. That Luigi beanie did not hit 100,000 sales. Someone had doctored it. And why? You know, why do they do this stuff? Why do truthers lie? They couldn't get to the person who altered it. But this was not true. An image authentically shows a screenshot of an Amazon listing reflecting over 100,000 sales of the green Luigi beanie following the arrest of Luigi. False. But, and this is an important caveat here, GQ did a story on it, and they said, will the other most famous Luigi, the Nintendo character, also see a merch boom from this? A viral tweet purporting a spike in the green Luigi beanie suggests it's possible. The claim was debunked, but the debunked claim brought 200,000 people who liked it and could well turn this fiction into reality. So he sold 100 hats. A story came up claiming he sold 100,000. As a result of the story, 200,000 people liked or shared that hat. So it might actually reach that number of sales. So there you go. Interesting marketing tactic there. Unsurprisingly, Luigi merch is surging. The arrest of a suspect of killing a CEO had an unexpected consequence: a morbid cottage industry of t-shirts, hats, wine tumblers venerating the internet's new folk hero. And that's from GQ. Eccentric View says, how are they predictable? Oh, contrails, how are they predictable? Well, first of all, let's go with why. The Air Force had the problem of how do we keep our airplanes from being shot down? Because if it's a military operation, do you want to leave a trail? Obviously, no. So they determined that you could avoid making trails if you took into account the temperature, the pressure, and the altitude, and the geographical area. And of course, through meteorological data and observation, they could fairly well guess what days would produce these trails and what times to avoid flying at these altitudes. By keeping these things in mind, they could avoid leaving trails. And this is basically a way of saying that contrails are completely dependent on the atmospheric conditions, that the atmosphere causes them, and that the airplane passes through indicates the conditions that are already there. They're not causing it. It's called faulty causality. That's the fallacy. People will say, the sky was clear, then the planes came over, and now the sky's not clear. No, you were going to have stratospheric cirrus clouds anyway. The planes just helped forecast it. So they are predictable. And they've been predictable. Look up the Appleman chart, goes back to 1958. 1958 Appleman chart. And if you can't confront that as a chemtrail fanatic, then you're no longer being honest at that point. Because the Appleman chart debunks your entire premise. So now the bar is raised. If you want to keep chemtrails as a conversation, as a conspiracy theory going, you have to start predicting them. And they're not predictable. You cannot predict them because your premise is that this is some secret experiment, some secret operation. But when you try to get people on this topic, they always have they all did the same thing. It's almost like a cult. They all say, well, what about cloud seeding? Well, what do you mean, what about cloud seeding? You tell me, because you ask them, they don't know anything about cloud seeding. They'll say, what about geoengineering? Well, do you know what geoengineering is? And they don't. They think geoengineering is some science fiction version of weather manipulation and weather weapons. But you're not dealing with reasonable people. You're dealing with people who have accepted a faulty premise against reason with the aid of logically fallacious argumentation, beginning with a loaded question. Okay, let's continue. Scrolling through my Twitter feed. Congressman Jeff Drew said on Fox News he confirmed that Intel is behind the drone invasion. Is anybody here in Jersey who can report on these things? It doesn't surprise me that you have so many false reports because there's no standards. I used to say, send me your videos of the space station. And I got so tired of people sending me videos of airplanes and helicopters that I said, let's just stop. I will no longer accept any videos purporting to be the space station unless you have two different witnesses, two cameras on the same light so we can triangulate. So, for example, if the space station is going to be visible where you are, for me to see a video that you send me and consider it to be evidence, I would have to see another video of the same light from somewhere 50 miles away at the same time. That's the only way you could triangulate and determine that what you're seeing is of the altitude you would expect, 185 miles up. If you can't see it from these two different areas, even 50 miles apart, then likely it's a plane and it's no higher than 30,000 feet. FF says China has a fake station too. Why isn't this reported? Good question. There are some people who share videos of, or rather transits of it. But another one of our standards of evidence here is that you cannot submit to me a ISS transit in front of the sun or in front of the moon and say that's evidence of a witness, that you witnessed it. Because if it's in front of the sun, you didn't see it. You had to have a filter. Your camera caught it. And if it's in front of the moon, you didn't see it because it's at night and you're only catching its silhouette in front of the moon. And yet the only times that we actually see the thing in detail are when it's in front of the sun or moon. And why is that? For obvious reasons. It's a magic trick. If it were real, we would be able to see it regularly, and it wouldn't require lunar and solar transits that are more difficult to catch and that specifically eliminate the eyewitness. Okay, let's move on. The past was alterable. The past had never been altered. Oceania was at war with East Asia. Oceania had always been at war with East Asia. That's Orwell, 1984. Orwell is highly relevant right now because we're living in 1984 in a way because the present is entirely under the control of media through fake news. And through this, they have controlled the past. And if you don't think this is true, you think it's hyperbole, just consider how long have you been paying attention to fake news events that get mixed in with the real. For as long as you've been paying attention, you have been observing manufactured history. And it's not just the fake news that they insert, the simulations, the big events, the big transformative psyops. It's not only that. To an even greater extent, it's by what they omit. It's all about their framing. So it's all about the frame of reference which we collectively share. We're all on the same sheet. It's monolithic. This monolithic media has replaced monotheism, and it is a monotheistic religion for all intents and purposes as far as its structure with your media priesthood. Eccentric View says some trails dissipate immediately, some stay up for 20 minutes. Right. Now, one thing to be clear on here, Eccentric Views, is that these are not the result of a spray. And you also have to be clear here, and chemtrail people are very shifty. They really are. And I think it's because they don't want to be caught. But it basically goes like this. Are you contending that commercial airplanes are the culprits, yes or no? And if you can't answer that, conversation's over. Because some people will say, no, it's unmarked military airplanes. Or it's drones. And that's a different conversation. But if that's your contention, that no, it's not the regular airplanes, it's the secret ones that nobody sees. If that's your contention, then you're also adding in a new element. These invisible or unmarked airplanes. And if that's where you're going, then you have to explain, why do 99.9% of chemtrail believers point to standard contrails left by regular airplanes? And some will say, well, they're misled, but I'm the truth. I'm the chemtrail truth. Then I ask them, well, then where's the evidence? And they'll say, well, it's coming from the stratospheric aerosol injections that block the sun. Like, where are these? Where are these unmarked drones? But they are condensation. These are repeatable, testable, and predictable. They're not chemicals. It's condensation. These can be created through, they are created through a known process. Like, there's not even a debate on the matter. So, in fact, this is another question. If you're a chemtrail believer, do you believe in contrails? Or are you disputing condensation trails? Do you believe that some contrails are chemtrails? I'm trying to get where people are at with this. What are they denying? Because you have to weigh your theory against the prevailing theory. And the prevailing explanation is condensation trails. And if you're saying those aren't the explanation, then you have to provide something a little more conclusive. And the main issue, again, is predictability. So if you can't deal with predictability, then if you can't predict your chemical trails, then you don't have an argument. And I think what gets people as well is they imagine that the atmosphere up above where these things are occurring is just like the air they're breathing down here on the ground. But every 1,000 feet up, it's like 2 degrees colder. So you're talking about a significant qualitative difference. You're talking about rarefied air, freezing temperatures. It shouldn't be a surprise that hot exhaust and jet fuel condensate would form nuclei around which little ice crystals would condense, leaving behind these vast trails. You could not have enough chemtrail juice or whatever substance you're putting in there. You couldn't have enough in one plane to leave trails mile after mile after mile after mile. You wouldn't be able to have enough substance in there. But you could have a practically unlimited amount of hot air. Lieutenant Weinberg says, condensation implies wet, and I've been in small planes through clouds, and the windows don't get wet. What do you think about snow? Yeah, what do you think about rain? I mean, what do you mean by they don't get wet? This is where it's at. It says, chemtrailers as a movement sucks. When they start wearing NASA space helmets around Walmart, I'll listen. This is the worst conspiracy. Yeah, it's not even a good conspiracy. It's an old canard. And here's the point of it. In my opinion, the powers that be have set up this internal worldview that we're meant to take in. But not everybody accepts climate change. Climate change is only believable to those on the political left. So how do you target the right wing with sky phobia? How do you get right-wingers to be afraid of the sky and of climate change? You give them an alt climate change. Chemtrail theory is alt climate change. That is what it is. And this is true too. This is how you know you're in a box. You're in a box if your opinions are this predictable. If you believe in chemtrails, you're not on the left. You're therefore on the right. You will not find a liberal leftist who believes in chemtrails because they have something else. They got climate change. You're not going to find a conspiracy theorist on the right that believes in climate change. They think it's silly, yet they believe in chemtrails. It's a bifurcated psyop. And one of our axioms here is that if the psyop is perfectly bifurcated, split down the middle, it's fake. It's a tug of war. It's two sides of the same coin. So you got the pro side, which is climate change. That's the pro mainstream version. Then you have the anti side that says geoengineering, climate change. I mean, chemtrails. So which side are you, pro or anti? I'm anti-pro because I don't believe in that stuff. But I'm also anti-anti because I don't fall for the controlled opposition narrative. Glenn says, what do you make of the TikTok patterns overhead that are laid down by airplanes that are outside of established flight corridors? One, you have zero evidence for flights outside of the established corridors. You have no evidence for that. And two, the TikTok patterns are not dissimilar to the streets that you drive on every day. Why do you have intersections? Well, because people drive predictable routes. And those flight patterns that you see up above, the tic-tac patterns, are because these are predictable flight paths. That's the explanation. Call someone who works in air traffic control. You think they fly random? You think they're sending people up in the air on random routes and they're just dodging each other? No, they have very strict paths. And if you now just follow this. So you have these TikToks above a grid, and some will say, oh, it's a grid pattern because they're killing us. No, follow the grid. Follow it all the way. Oh, look, it connects airports. Draw straight lines connecting all the airports, connecting all the runways, connecting all the flight paths, and you're going to see crisscrosses. You don't see the crisscrosses every time because it's weather dependent. But you know what you can do is you can predict what days you're likely to see these crisscrosses if you understand the science behind persistent condensation trails. Flozik says IPS speaks facts. Oh yeah, and these are facts, and it is important because there are about 7 logical fallacies built into chemtrails. One, the main one that catches people, and the hardest to disabuse them of, is the appeal to motive. Oh, the bad guys are so bad, of course they're doing this. Okay, you can rule that one out. What are they spraying? That's a fallacy. It's a loaded question. It implies a spray. So it's not what is that trail behind the airplane, it's what are they spraying. So those are 2 different statements. The question assumes a spray if you're saying what are they spraying instead of what is that trail. And a spray means there's a substance inside of the plane that is squirting out. Well, sorry, but there's not enough substance to squirt out this spray over mile after mile after mile. It would outweigh the fuel. However, there's an unlimited supply of hot air that creates the effect. So what are they spraying is a logical fallacy. It's also an appeal to ignorance. So an appeal to ignorance fallacy is when there are satisfactory explanations, but one asks a question as though that hasn't already been answered. And it will be something that the ignorant will be confounded by. They'll say, well, I don't know. Neither do I. Well, just because you don't know doesn't mean it's not known. So the appeal to ignorance fallacy is also built into this premise. And there's no excuse for it at this point. If you're going to seriously contend that you're having poisons dumped on your head, there's no excuse not to know both explanations equally well. But to make a claim in the form of a question as a way of dodging the established explanation is fallacious. Then you have several others as you go deeper into it. Often they rely on everybody knows, and just there's no way to advance chemtrail theory without using logical fallacies. And one thing you will never find is you will never find a chemtrail believer who wears a mask. If I think there's a flu going around, I'm going to wear a mask. Like, to me, it's just simple logic. If I thought that somebody was spraying me with poisons or spraying my house, I would put on PPE. So where do you get off claiming that there's this campaign to spray you like bugs and you're not going to wear a mask or carry an umbrella? Lieutenant Weinberg says, I simply doubt that clouds are water because they aren't wet when you fly through them, but I'm not a chemtrail moron. That's a meteorology question. And there are valid explanations for what we're seeing. Are you saying that clouds aren't what we say they are or what we're told? Because clouds are pretty well understood. In fact, what we call cirrus clouds, which are the contrails. Contrails are anthropogenic cirrus clouds, man-made cirrus clouds. The word cirrus has the same root as circle, and it means curled. And cirrus clouds have been observed for like 200 years. When they were originally called cirrus clouds, it was like the 1800s, early 1800s. And yet, some people will say there were no cirrus clouds before 1990. These things are new, and that's just not true. Okay, let's move on. We already dealt with chemtrails. We dealt with Mandela effects. We're dealing with simulation theory. And when I say dealing with, is we're kind of fumigating all the non-skeptical explanations and non-answers and non-explanations. I think it's better to be agnostic and informed non-believers rather than a mix of skepticism and entertaining absurd impossibilities or hypotheticals or theories that have no factual basis. Okay, let's move on. Bad Romance says, it couldn't apply this to an assumption someone is an actor without evidence. Clarify on that. I'm not exactly sure what you mean. All right, I'm going to go through my Twitter feed. If you want to follow me there, it's IPS Think Tank. Hey, this is one of the biggest examples of concurrent programming in a long time. This shooter coming out, this kill the rich theme is out there, and the Joker connections are abundant. Joker, Riddler, Travis Bickle, but the Luigi green hat being adopted, the wardrobe of the shooter being adopted, the imitation of their martyr, of their vigilante. This is right out of the Joker movie. And here's a screen cap from Joker where the newspaper says, "Clown vigilante kill the rich, a new movement." And everyone's wearing a Joker mask because they're part of this movement. So they're dressing like their hero. And the Joker mask has green hair. So now you have this new guy, Luigi, and people are emulating him. They empathize with him. And now they're putting on green hats, like the green hair, dressing like him. This is right out of Joker. So this is a great example of predictive programming, priming people to accept a certain narrative, and when it happens, they react just like they're reacting to a movie. Okay, there you go. Bad Romance says, are you working off the premise the guy who is from Maryland is an actor and not just the one who maybe had a breakdown? Well, I happen to think that there are no patsies. There are only actors. There are no second shooters. You know, these are all various narratives that hide the fakery. Like Thomas Crooks didn't really die. That was a hoax. Trump's ear wasn't shot. The fireman wasn't shot. And this shooter that we're dealing with here is just an actor. This is a glorified crisis actor. Josh Squatch says, I've been listening on Pocket Cast. I appreciate your different approach to this screenplay world. Disbelieve by default. There's no reason not to be skeptical. To be skeptical means one thing: suspend judgment. Suspend it for 3 days. Get more information. Because 3 days after this CEO shooting, we had plenty. And it's beyond just the Joker thing. Here's an example of how we know what we're talking about here. I saw the movie, the #1 movie series called The Madness. I said, hey guys, it's #1. It's going to contain concurrent programming and predictive programming for future fake news events. Just a prediction utilizing predictive programming as a model, looking at media in this way. So I made a prediction that The Madness would predict future news events. Now, if we weren't correct in our assertions here, this wouldn't be possible. So I watched The Madness, and a lot of things come out of it. You've got the ghost gun, 3D printed gun. You have the masked Antifa with their gun commune. You have the billionaire CEO who gets shot. He gets assassinated. Not to mention other tie-ins. You know, the main character is essentially Don Lemon turned into kind of a hero. You have various characters on the world stage right now, like Stu Peters, who turns out to be Brother 14, the neo-Nazi leader, getting paid by the shadowy billionaire. You have the Laura Loomer character, Laura Jennings, the conspiracy theorist journalist. So there are many instances where this series was dealing with the exact same themes we're dealing with here. It has the whole oppressor versus oppressed, working class versus the elite, but it did have the scenario of a billionaire CEO with too much influence funding these right-wingers and creating violence on the world stage. You know, it's about what we're experiencing now. The Madness is about mind viruses turning people violent. But it specifically had a ghost gun and a vigilante and the assassination of a billionaire CEO, which is a heroic act. So another example was Rebel Ridge. And Rebel Ridge opens up where a black man is attacked and mugged, robbed, mistreated by a group of racist cops who have a racist police station. And they're all like Klansmen, you know, secretly. And he has to fight against them. But the opening scene, they run him off the road and they kind of brutalize him. And they rob his money, and they take his money, which is how this whole thing starts. Well, right after Rebel Ridge comes out, you had Tyreek Hill, the football player, Dolphins, yanked out of his car on the way to the game. Tyreek Hill body cam footage is upsetting. Reminds me of Rebel Ridge, which everybody should watch. So it happens at the same time. When it's like, look, 2 words, Rebel Ridge. You know, a lot of these NFL people, when commenting on what happened to their teammate, cited Netflix. So what is it? Does life follow Netflix? No. Psyops, simulated events, follow predictive programming. Psyops follow Netflix. It's not real life. Bad Romance says, what's your evidence for if that's... Oh, what you mean, my evidence for what? Oh, have I heard of apophenia? Yeah, I've heard of apophenia, pareidolia. Yes. But you would be illogical if your basic premise was everything you see on the news is real until you can prove it fake. That would be illogical on your part, and it would be a lack of situational awareness. Because, for one thing, you're not given enough information by what CNN shows you to debunk their own reportage. They're not going to tell you they're lying. So if your assumption is they're telling the truth, then you're gullible. You can say we're suffering from mental illness and apophenia, but that would be a limited perspective based on a lack of research. I have receipts for all of my claims. And what we have observed for 7 or 8 years here is that there is a... Well, actually, let me read your comment first, then I'll address it. He says, you can make connections with TV shows and movies in real life all kinds of ways creatively, but it doesn't mean they're actively predicting a situation. Now, you say that, but we have been actively predicting things with predictive programming as a predictive model for several years straight now. We call it real time. I can provide you numerous examples. And what I'm saying is that this is formulaic. It is systemic. It's a covert propaganda technique. You can laugh, but I actually think it's funnier that you're so unaware that this is a ridiculous proposition to you, because that means your mind is contained. It's outside of your ability or your willingness to comprehend or entertain the idea that there is a concerted effort to use entertainment media to influence people's opinions on the news. Like, that's outside of what you consider to be possible. To use such a proposition is apophenia. You psychopathologize it. Like, oh, people who don't believe the news are mentally ill. Where are you, North Korea? Are you not allowed to have a dissenting opinion without having psychiatry brought into the question here? I would say that you're not exercising critical thinking. You think you're pushing back against my assumption. Your assumptions are that you can trust the news, that the news is telling the truth, that the news provides you a window to the world so you can learn things about the world that are happening far away, when no, it's a filter. And if you're ignorant of perception management, influence operation, and psyops, that's on you. But you would be a reality denialist to say that regular entertainment news isn't purposefully synchronized with future fake news agendas, that entertainment and news are inseparable. They've all been whored out to the monolithic mind control government that runs this place, like it or not. You know, we are the devil's advocates here. When someone says, I'm going to challenge you, I'm going to be a devil's advocate. No, you're a media advocate. I'm the devil's advocate. I'm challenging the media. You're the one defending the status quo. And if your defense of the status quo is to call us mentally ill, like, yeah, there's 300 people listening last night and we're all apopheniacs. We're all just very confused. At a very minimum, to give us full credit, you'd have to say, wow, you've given us a remarkable collection of instances where life is imitating what happens in the movies. Let me give you an example. These are my top 11 predictions for the Trump head wound. Actually, I added a new one here. Batman declares war on Rupert Thorne. Finale of Batman Caped Crusader. So around the same time that Trump is getting his ear pierced by an AR-15, Rupert Thorne, a Trump proxy in this Batman cartoon, has his right ear clipped. We have this came out just as Trump was about to get his fake ear wound. Thine ears shall bleed. Then you had The Atlantic. The Atlantic, this came out before, and we were talking about this days before the Trump head wound. We were saying, Trump's about to get his head wound. We predicted Trump's head wound. So if you want to call that apophenia, then you are blind. I mean, look at this. What do you notice about the top of the ear? Now you can say, oh, that's just a coincidence. Well, you're going to be saying that's just a coincidence a lot of times. So here's another example. The Boys season 4, episode 8 was called Assassination Run, and they had to change the title after the fact. I don't know if you heard about this. So you're saying apophenia. You're saying this is a mental illness firing off to notice these things. However, The Boys season 4, episode 8 had a scene so reminiscent of the Trump assassination that they had to retitle the episode. There are several articles on this because the character, the Homelander. So look at this. The Boys adds content warning on season 4 finale after Trump assassination attempt. They had to change the upcoming episode title following the attempt. They added a disclaimer. Why? It's because the character so closely resembled, well, this is the Trump character, but it so closely resembled that exact scenario that unfolded. So much so that they noticed it. The day of the shooting, we saw this trailer, Captain America, Brave New World, Harrison Ford playing the president, gets shot at while giving a speech. We have so many examples of the head wound and various deaths. Fallout was a strong one. So in Fallout, you had the one drop of blood on the right side of that figurine, the foosball character that looked like Trump. But Machete was a big one. In Machete, you had the Trump-like senator, played by De Niro, giving a speech about anti-immigration when he gets shot, and then his shooter gets shot in the ear. Now, this connection is pretty deep. It's pretty much like the same exact speech. I'm just glossing over it because we talk about the stuff ad nauseum. It's so formulaic. It's so predictable. Now, and I'm not being defensive. What I'm just saying here is that you're going to come in here with no information and call us mentally ill. I'm like, do you have enough information to refute what we're putting forth? I don't think so. And if you're saying you're challenging our assumptions, I'm like, no, we're the ones challenging the basic assumption. But anyway, I appreciate your comments, but it's not constructive to start off on the premise that you're mentally ill. Although I will say that mainstream news consumers are delusionists and you could say have experienced a collective schizoid break. If you treat the mental simulation, the mental map of the world as the territory, and your mental map isn't aligned with it, yeah, you've had a break from objective reality. You're not an objectivist if you filter your worldview through mainstream media or alternative media. You're increasingly subjectivist, further from what you consider to be sanity. But we have years of this stuff. I mean, it goes into nuance, but what we have determined is that there's a deliberate synchronization between entertainment media, and it's not just movies. It's movies, it's books, it's comics, it's games, it's the timing of the releases. We have voluminous evidence that there is a deliberate synchronization between entertainment media and future news events. That future news events means that they schedule fake news events long before they execute these things. And not only that, but knowing that these future fake events are going to be inserted into our historic narrative, they have to paint these things onto the zeitgeist. They have to make them part of our world view. And feel free to call in 505-510-4226. I mean, I'm always up to debate these things. But as a think tank, we've moved past mere incredulity as an argument against manufactured history. And people who don't know that our history is manufactured suffer from naivety, a lack of information. And if you're someone suffering from an abysmal lack of information and research, you're in no position to mock those of us who are far more informed. I would weigh this too. I would weigh our informed disbelief about any news story against your low information belief. So you believe this shooter is real based on low information because you saw it on the screen. I don't believe it's real because I'm informed about psychological operations in general, but about this one in particular. And the more information I have, the more I can say with certainty it's a simulation. But I have reasons. There's reasons and receipts. Okay, I believe I had some comments I wanted to respond to from my YouTube account. And I'm not defensive about it. I'm actually very confident in our research and our model, because there's a qualitative difference between media consumption from a mainstream view and a skeptic's view. One is passive, one is active. And active media consumption leads to wildly different conclusions than the passive absorbing, which is, again, by definition, low information. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and access my comments here so we can get those out of the way. You know, I might just upload a separate video where I'll go through the different comments. Tom103 says, do you think the Close Encounters train crash UFO cover story was purely for the white noise event, or did they just rip it off? Interesting question. Certainly some overlap. What's remarkable about this, too, is that we find many examples of programming in the books, in the movies, putting the ideas out there, saturating the media ecosystem with these ideas, oftentimes decades in advance. And I know it works. I mean, we see the results of this. I mean, for example, we were looking at the Machete movie where Robert De Niro's character gets shot. And when I went to look at that specific scene, there were people there on 7/13 who saw the movie 15 years prior. So think about it. 15 years after a movie, it's your first association with something you see on TV. That means their system works. And it works because they're tapping into post-hypnotic suggestions, ideas they've already planted, seeds they've planted. You have been mentally drilling, mentally rehearsing these future scenarios, and you didn't even know it. Let me play this clip here regarding the New Jersey Senator John Bramnick calling for a limited state of emergency to ban drones. Apparently, some are the size of cars, and they're flying over New Jersey.
So, sir, the FBI and our Newark field office, along with the state and local partners there, the Bureau is actively investigating the situation you mentioned, just the unexplained sighting of drone activity over that part of New Jersey, including proximity to sensitive sites and areas of concern. So we do not attribute that to an individual or a group yet. We're investigating, but I don't have an answer of who's responsible for that, of one or more people that are responsible for those drone flights. But we're actively investigating. What the Bureau has done to aid our state and local partners is what we generally do, enlist the help of the interagency, enlist the help of the public. There's a tip line there.
Okay, enlisting the help of the public. So I think this is how they're building the hysteria, where people are reporting drones when they're looking at airplanes.
The 1-800 call FBI, tips.fbi for information from the public that could help us resolve this. It is concerning.
Is the public at risk? Is public safety at risk? Are we concerned that there are nefarious intentions that could cause either national security or a public safety incident that would put Americans at risk?
There's nothing that is known that would lead me to.
Anyway, boring, but a mystery drone spotted over New Jersey, Staten Island, largely a hyped up hoax, but they're getting the public involved, and this is obviously engineering some kind of a hysteria. So it looks like it may be building towards something, and many have suspected it's going to be Project Bluebeam, fake aliens. Maybe that's the case. Sadly, they probably could fake an alien invasion because of the sheer number of people who want to believe it, and a lot of people do want to believe it. Although they've made this perfect bifurcation, left-wingers believe that aliens are essentially saviors who have transcended the world or transcended into this higher state through technology, whereas the right-wingers will see them as demons because Tucker Carlson. Okay, well, this has been great. We covered most of what I wanted to get to tonight. These stories are still unfolding, specifically the story with the drones. As far as the AutoHoax Con number 3, just a heads up here. This is going to be a Zoom conference, and it's been announced for December 14th, 3:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. And the speakers and the topics will be announced later. It's all to be announced. But if you want to sign up, here it is. There's a link below. Okay, commenter says, you're also not an objectivist if your only model is that everything is based on a movie, can make connections between movies and episodes all my life. Does it mean the movie's predicting my life? No, that's not what we're saying. We're saying that very specific mainstream movies that have messaging, narratives, and other elements that are perfectly aligned with the political agenda of a news event that happens at the same time or right after is evidence of fakery, that these are part of a contiguous stream of propaganda messages. So, for example, when Roe v. Wade had been overturned and there was the leak, remember the leak, Roe v. Wade 2022? When that happened, I was noticing, okay, feminists, marching, abortion's a big topic, and I decided to tune out of the news. And I turned on HBO, Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon. And what do I see? I go from CNN, feminists marching, shouting for abortion rights, to watching Game of Thrones. What do I see? I see the Queen dying in childbirth because the state needed the male heir. And she, being the most powerful woman in the country, the Queen, was still just a broodmare for the state. And she was barbarically operated on, and she was killed in order to get that baby out. And so that imagery perfectly went along with the worst fears of the left and their views on abortion and what it would mean if their rights were taken away. So you could say, well, that's just a coincidence. Well, okay, you could say it's a coincidence, but it happens every single time. Donald Trump kicks off his campaign in Waco, which has tremendous significance for white nationalism, extremism. Waco, of course, Dave Koresh and all that. He kicks off his campaign in Waco. 2 days before, Netflix debuts the documentary Waco, An American Apocalypse. So Waco, American Apocalypse hits just as Trump kicks off his campaign in Waco. Was there foreknowledge in Netflix? And it's not just that. I mean, these are big, these alignments. But we also have other examples, such as Tom Wolfe's book, A Man in Full, was made into a Netflix series. And they consciously designed the main character, Charlie Coker, off of Trump. And he dies. We have examples where Trump is consciously recognized as the basis for a character. Biff Tannen, for example. And these movies contain, predictably, references to future fake news events. Look at Trackdown. You know, even CNN noticed Trackdown. And this was a 1958 TV show that predicted this character named Trump. Look, the television show that predicted Trump in 1958. 1950s predicted a border wall from a fictional character named Trump. Now, this character not only had a con man named Trump building a wall, and he's this demagogue that he creates this problem, but what's more, he gets arrested. This TV show was talked about in 2016 because it had so many hits as a prediction for Trump. And they said, oh, these are just eerie coincidences. 1958 episode, a demagogue named Trump convinces a town that only he can save the citizens from threats outside their borders by building a wall. And they imply a cosmic threat, which implies Space Force. But when this was analyzed for its coincidences in 2016, it was before Trump was arrested and the character in this movie gets arrested. So there's 3 or more predictions in this particular movie. But then it gets even deeper when you look at the entire canon of predictive programming involving Trump. The release date of the film correlates to a Quantum Leap episode where Trump, 1958, is the time travel show's date for this particular episode. It has Donald Trump as a 12-year-old kid in a cab. So it perfectly corresponds to 1958 and his age. And moreover, the release date of Trackdown corresponds to the episode date from Quantum Leap. And we have hundreds of examples. And it goes beyond just Trump. You have Elon Musk, a very famous character. Elon Musk emerges out of a book, Mars, A Technical Tale, by Werner von Braun, about the first man to colonize Mars, the dictator of Mars called the Elon. So what we're describing here aren't random, because they all have political messaging, propaganda messaging with specificity. And the timing of the releases is even more in favor of our explanation than drawing from movies from the past, where, yeah, you could argue that if you have 1,000 movies to draw from, you could construct a picture. But we're talking about real-time propaganda alignments. Look at the timing of the Uvalde shooting, how it corresponded to Stranger Things, and how they had to put a warning on Stranger Things. We have numerous examples of the Batman fictional universe being used as a propaganda vector for all of the shooters connecting to Trump. So another element here is that if you're looking at contrived media events, they're all happening within a fictional universe. But within entertainment, they do use fictional universes with regularity, again, as propaganda vectors. All of the Christopher Nolan Batman movies, all of the Joker films are propaganda vectors that have very specific political import. Joker stands for the left, the Antifa, the oppressed, the class warfare narrative. Batman references more the right, the QAnon, the vigilante, the anti-side, rather. So you have these dialectics that are existing in the movies and in the fake news events, and they use the movies to condition you. They use the movies to set the stage, the narrative framework. Why do you think people are comparing this character to Travis Bickle, to Joker, to Robin Hood? I mean, they have these fictional frames of reference for these fake news events. But the advent of concurrent programming or research on programming as in the real-time stuff is far more conclusive. And I have a number of articles on this, and I'm thinking about putting out another book on the Metascript, just putting a lot of these articles together to really put down what I'm really maintaining here, what I'm actually stating. Because what I'm arriving at here is not the result of cherry picking, logical fallacy, sharpshooter fallacy. No, we root these things out. This is an objective analysis of what media is. And to say that the entertainment media, the books, the movies aren't purposefully aligned is just sheer ignorance at this point. And if you don't know about mind war, if you don't know about the psychological operations intrinsic in your news cycles, that's on you. So entertainment or entrainment? This is the question I raise. Entertainment or entrainment? Fake news is a vague description of what media consumers are seeing. It would be better described as simulated news events. Propaganda disguised as real news. So they're acting out like a reality TV show. These simulated events are not false flags. They're not inside jobs. And these simulated events are grafted onto actual events. They merge fake and real. That's what propaganda is. Lies mixed into the truth. And we have so many of these lies and simulated events and fake events that you can't say our history is objective. Our history is tainted all the time. And no matter how many fake news events we observe and comment on, the history books are always going to reflect what you see through the mainstream filters. All significant simulations are preceded by copious predictive programming. And predictive programming is a form of covert propaganda messaging. It's that simple. Covert propaganda messaging planted in the entertainment media. Although it's evident throughout all of the various media ecosystems, it comes from everywhere. There is concerted messaging. The internal consistency of the fakery with the entertainment and the news, the consistency of it reveals deliberate entrainment of past and future. It's almost like a form of prophecy fulfillment by the prophecy writers. And this leads some to think you're looking at, quote, synchronicity. I think you can abandon the idea of a military-industrial complex and replace it with the Psyop entertainment complex. That's where all the money goes. That's where all the energy goes. And the purpose of it, the reason for it, control of the present. Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. This is a worldview monopoly. And over time, and Napoleon said, history is lies agreed upon. That's 100% true. Media is lies agreed upon. And over time, the body of fake news becomes our history, which is clearly tampered with. And of course, history is written by the conquerors. So skepticism of media shouldn't end with questioning the news narratives. It should actually extend into looking at media as monolithic in purpose, part of a closed informational system. The concept of the fictional universe has a great deal of relevance here, and it puts things into perspective. A fictional universe superimposed over the real thing, real merged with fake. But I want to point out, too, that we are, by applying skepticism, we're taking the subtractive view. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not adding on to what is being presented. This is not an augmentation. This is not a construct that I built and we're putting onto things. This is the result of subtracting assumptions. So that commenter comes in and he says, I'm going to challenge your assumptions. It's like, no, you came in here full of assumptions about what media is. And what we're doing is we're taking away their basic argument, their basic appeal to their own authority. So the perspective we're taking is subtractive, it's skeptical, and it results in agnosticism or informed disbelief. And again, you have a scale. You put informed disbelief on one side. Like, this guy doesn't believe the story, but he's exceptionally informed about it. And weigh that against somebody who believes the story because they saw it on TV. What weighs more? Low information belief or informed non-belief? Informed non-belief. We know more. That's why we believe less. You're a believer. We are knowers. We don't believe a lot of things that aren't true, and we don't have false explanations blinkering our perspectives here. And one other point too, because that person was putting LOL in his comments because they assume they have the intellectual high ground. And so those of us calling out the fake news, we have a moral high ground. Yeah, I'll put my phone back on. And we have more information. We have the intellectual high ground. We're not coming at this from a perspective of blind faith belief. But yeah, phones are open if you want to call in. We still have about 8 minutes here. And I'm not against debating, although my interest here isn't in doing favors to people who are married to the system. I'm not trying to disabuse you of your misconceptions about what media is. I'm not trying to wake people up. I'm mainly trying to aggregate those who've already seen through, who already know what media is, who've already experienced it, who observe it. See, we have a methodology. We have a philosophic framework here. Like, we are not arising at these conclusions by accident, by randomness. In fact, I have a pretty useful course here on Teachable. Put a link here. The IPS Institute for Advanced Media Deconstruction, Media Literacy, Psyop Deconstruction, Metascript Analysis. So I have a course here that explains the basic lexicon. Viewers who automatically believe what they see on TV to be true and only consider it to be false if it's been debunked for them are auto-believers, non-skeptical. There's no filtration when it comes to the basic story. Any skepticism they have is merely partisan, and it's about surface details. But they don't have a skeptical view of media itself. So the auto-believers are a different form of media consumer. They're passive. They're trusting. They're faithful. Our perspective here shifts the burden of proof back to the media. It's rejection of the obligatory faith in news. But the connections we're making here aren't specious, and you're free to examine them and try to arrive at a competing explanation for what we're presenting. But if it's a hand wave and a psychological diagnosis, you're way off. And you're not doing yourself any favors by falling for or accepting bad explanations. Like, being naive is not a position of strength. Situational awareness makes a lot more sense, especially today. You're looking at a media landscape where truth is secondary to click value. We're encouraged to embrace subjectivity. We cannot tell the difference between real and fake visually. And all you can claim is that if you're a believer in news media, is that you're a believer. How many news stories do you believe in that you can actually claim to know? So what you're left with here is having to accept the fact that you're merely a believer, not a knower in any significant regard. And we're approaching this as skeptics, as knowers, as seekers of information that we can rely upon. And if we can't find that, we have to reject the claim. So the difference between believers and knowers is qualitative. To be a knower is to be an active news consumer. So again, I'm just saying, if you're still stuck in the realm of mainstream mediation, you're a passive consumer of propaganda and you don't even know half the stuff that you're taking in. You've got mind aids. You're catching every mind virus sent your way. They create this character right out of the movies, and it impresses everybody on TikTok. They're in love with this shooter, and you think the shooter is real because why? Because you have mind aids. He's a mind virus, and you caught it. And you caught it because you haven't been mind war inoculated. And it is that simple. You passively accepted it as real. You took no responsibility for filtering out hardcore government propaganda designed to make you think it's okay to kill CEOs, that you have the moral high ground. I mean, these influence operations are designed to warp your mind. I'm not advocating murdering innocent people because they have more money or they feel entitled or whatever their argument is. Just like I'm not going to be radicalized by some religious book into strapping a bomb vest on and blowing up a deli or whatever. So mainstream media fundamentalist believers can be radicalized, activated, made to believe dumb things and act in irrational ways. Voltaire said this, right? Voltaire, about they can make you believe in absurdities, then they can make you commit atrocities. Yeah, anyone who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities, Voltaire. And I don't believe any absurdities. You do, if you're a mainstream believer. So I'm not running around on TikTok fawning over some psychopath who blew some guy's brains out or whatever out of some sense of justice. And they see it as justice, not murder. And this is just scratching the surface. I mean, you wait. I mean, if you're a mainstream consumer of news and you start looking at it from this perspective, it's far worse than merely making connections between propaganda and future simulated news events. Wait until you find out how much we disbelieve in things you take for granted. Nobody died at fill in the blank. And we can go down the list. Yeah, if you want to call in, phones are open. You still have about 5 or 6 more minutes. And if you're mad because we're attacking government-sponsored mind control media, that's on you. You know, I would burn a TV in front of you. Because what has happened is the religions have been supplanted by a bigger religion, which is disguised as, well, media at large is disguised as this presence that seeks to inform us about the world. So we're all witnesses to everybody else. We all know what's going on. But it's not really there to inform you. Its true purpose is to conform you. And our history is being conformed to somebody's perspective. It's not truth. If our media is full of fake events, propaganda operations, influence operations, if it's not totally objective, and if all the fake news and the simulated events go into the history books, then you cannot claim that we're not being steered into a very myopic perspective. Okay, well, you still have a few more minutes to call in, 505-510-4226. Again, our purpose here is philosophic. We're debating. We're discussing what is. This is not coming from within the political horseshoe. We're not conspiracy theorists. In fact, we've debunked most of the conspiracy theories out there. The only conspiracy theory that's real, that you can see, that you can prove, is this. And it's not even a conspiracy theory. The real conspiracy is the active and successful conspiracy to synchronize the minds of billions of people around a worldview monopoly. Mission accomplished. Like William Casey, CIA, said, we will know our job is complete when everything the American public believes is false. It's like, yeah, your job is complete. Mission accomplished. You did it. Good job, CIA. You've turned us into a nation of believers. And another thing, too, that works against us, or against those who are still gullible, is that you don't have enough time every day to debunk all the fake news. No, phones are open. I don't know why it's not opening. We have more than 2 or 3 days worth of news every 24 hours. You couldn't possibly debunk it all. So if you don't have the right philosophic approach, if you don't have the right methodology when it comes to news media, you're going to be submerged in the sea of irrelevance. You're not going to know. You'll dwell in confusion. And I'm not confused. I would say I'm the least confused person you've ever heard. I'm absolutely unconfused. My reality is not augmented. Now, I'm making it a point to understand where the different segments of society are with regard to their view of things. And you could look at it broadly as the MSM box. But then you have Woketown and Trutherville, which are a bit more than just the mainstream box. It includes augmentations that are beyond what the normies believe, deeper into the programming. Paradox Penguin says these real-world events are being staged and the masses are tricked into thinking they're real. Yeah, it's formulaic. I mean, look at Edward Bernays and the role of public relations and perception management operations. Like, we have PSYOPs departments in the military. Mind war is not a conspiracy theory. PSYOPs are not a conspiracy theory. Crisis actors are not a conspiracy theory. Unfortunately, the conspiracy theorists don't go far enough. They don't go further than just like, okay, if this event is fake, it's not just that it's fake. It's that it necessarily involves so many agencies, from the DHS to the law enforcement, first responders, hospitals. There is such an integrated web of parties involved in these fake events that, no, you can't look at any of these things as anomalous or singular. They're all part of a body of content. In other words, these are all propaganda operations that exist within the same fictional universe. Another point that I have here is that we live in a global doomsday cult. Like you might say, hey, it's irrational and unreasonable to believe we are in the end times. The first time somebody told me they believed we were in the end times, I felt sorry for them. I'm like, wow, how brainwashed. How ridiculous that somebody at this day and age would think we are in the end of days. And I thought it was ridiculous. And he was coming at it from a religious perspective. But then you turn around and you realize that the dominant paradigm of today, the scientific consensus, is that we are in the end times. What do you think climate change eschatology really is? I mean, it's there to present you with an end of day scenario. If you don't believe we are in the end of times, you're not scientific. You're not thinking about planet killer asteroids, mutually assured destruction, nukes. You're not thinking about climate chaos. So if you don't believe we are in the end times, it's because you're not trusting the science. So now it is a scientific proposition, just as much as it's a religious one, that we are in the end times. And I would say it's not truly a scientific proposition. It's at the point where it ceases to be science, and it reinforces my original claim that mainstream media has supplanted religion in all of its aspects. God constructs, doomsday scenarios, has modern replacements for everything. Sin, heaven, space is heaven that even the atheists will believe in. Okay, well, we didn't get a call in. Don't know why phones are open despite what the caller may be saying. I hope we didn't have any big misunderstandings, but it's normal to want to push back against what sound like outlandish claims. But the burden of proof always lies with the extraordinary claim maker. So who's the extraordinary claim maker here? Media critics or the media? Serious question. Who's making the extreme claims, MSM or us? I would argue that it's the mainstream media, and the burden of proof is always on them. And if they can't provide it, whose fault is that? It's not my fault. I'm under no obligation to believe anything that isn't attended with facts to support it. And it's not my responsibility to find those facts when they don't supply them. It's their damn job. If you're the media and you can't convince me that anything is real, then you failed. Okay, we still have about 4 minutes. Infinite Plane Radio.
Yeah, it's Lynn. I'm just calling to make sure your phones, to verify that your phones are working. That's all.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Lynn, for calling in. Apparently, Bad Romance's phone isn't working, or he's gun shy, but whatever the case. I don't know.
What is his, what's his Weltanschauung? What's his worldview?
He said that he wants to challenge our premise here because we're making all these connections. And I'm saying that because he's challenging our assumptions. And I'm like, well, no, your assumption is that the news is faithfully informing you about the world. That's an assumption.
I can't believe that anybody out there at this late date still thinks that. In other words, if you would have said that 3, 4, 5 years ago, maybe. But at this late date, anyone out there that still thinks that the media can be trusted to report anything honestly, they're either not being honest with themselves, or they're bullshitting us when they tell us that. They don't really believe that. See, it's my contention that people are not rational in the intellectual sense. They basically align with a narrative that works for them and helps them make it through the next day, or helps them make it through life, because the narrative suits what they're doing. It justifies what they're doing. They're going to have to get up and go to work in the morning, or they're going to have to pay whatever it is they're doing, pay the mortgage. Whatever it is they're doing, the narrative suits their practical day-to-day life, and they have no interest or conception in whether there's any abstract, objective truth to the narrative. In other words, does it serve to reinforce what they have to do anyway? Rationalization, it's called.
Well, they have a a false intellectual high ground because they think that they're believers. So I believe this stuff, so I'm better than you because you don't believe, or I'm more secure. I'm more like grounded in reality or something. And I'm saying no. If you're a believer, then you are by definition dependent on whatever the news tells you. You're not a knower. And we are knowers here. And what we find out is that when we study one of these questionable events, the more we know about it, the less we believe it. And so I constantly say this, what would you rather be on the side of? Informed disbelief or low information belief? And so that guy, the caller or would-be caller, is a low information believer. And that has nothing to say to what we're doing. It doesn't even compete.
You're posing it, though, as an intellectual question, and I'm saying I don't think it really is for him or anybody else. And I don't think that they really care about whether what they're thinking logically makes sense, whether it conforms to any facts, whether it can be proven. I don't think they really care about that. I think it's about gang loyalty. It's about group affiliation. And the reaffirmation of any particular narrative, oh, they tried to shoot Trump, well, he must be the good guy, or, oh, yeah, we have to defend Ukraine because Russia invaded. Oh, well, there's Palestinians. January 6th is Israel's 9/11. People who are making who are standing behind these ridiculous ideas, all they're doing is reaffirming their gang loyalty. It is strictly ideological at this point. It has no objective substance outside of gang loyalty, ideological affiliation, or just a need to pretend that you believe in this stuff.
Add to it media literalism. They're also operating on the premise that the media is literally telling the truth. And I'm saying that media literalism is really their fundamental flaw. And they have not come to the information or arrived at the conclusion that they're being lied at the extent that they are. So their lack of awareness about how much they're lied to is what we're pointing out. And I think to recognize that is to recognize that they've been wrong about a lot of things. Their assumptions have all got to be re-examined. So we're offering a huge challenge, and I don't think they like the challenge. And the best they can do is say, oh, you're wrong, you're mentally ill because you don't agree with government propaganda. And I'm just like,
that's
look,
ad hominem, though.
It's ad hominem. And we've been doing this we've been consistently, in a very granular way, examining the news and entertainment as a monolithic whole for years on end. And we have not only consistently recognized the same patterns, but using this, we have made predictions consistently. And we've been borne out. I think the evidence has actually supported our essential premise here, and it consistently reveals itself to be accurate versus trusting the news. So no, we are truly media skeptics here. That's what our foundation is.
We may be capable of discerning the monolithic character of the media, for example, or of the whole political superstructure, or the way the economy and money works. The monolithic character of it, the fact that at one level or another, everybody's in on it. It's not like good guys and bad guys, or red team, blue team, but the people who are still committed to one or another ideologically driven narrative, they're committed to a polycentric view of reality. So, for example, they would say, "Oh, you're crazy when that the Russians or the Chinese communists would be working together with the World Economic Forum. That doesn't make any sense. They're in their worldview. It's a polycentric reality, and so they're committed to that because it's the only way they can justify. I mean, think about sustaining the cost of a Cold War for generations between the United States and the Soviet bloc, like a half a century of Cold War, and everything that cost, all the money that was spent, and the resources that were wasted, and everything else, and it was all based on an illusion. It was all based on an illusion. If people admitted that, or here's another one. There's a whole generation of people out there that they have this warm, fuzzy feeling about Ronald Reagan or Rush Limbaugh. Have you ever noticed that? When you hear people talk about Ronald Reagan or Rush Limbaugh, there's always this emotional undercurrent in their voice of, oh, it's an idea they fell in love with. And so they're emotionally committed to it. It's not rational.
Yeah,
and
that's
we're never going to break them from that, unless somehow or other we break that emotional bond. I don't know how you do that.
It's easier to fool a man than convince him he's been fooled. And I do think that a lot of the things people come to believe, they came to it through emotions. And when you challenge that belief, it brings those emotions back. It's like we're messing with their MK Ultra. We're touching their mind control programming. And it is triggering. So it may be triggering for them to have all of their assumptions challenged so flippantly from their perspective and irreverently. And honestly, I don't care what they believe. I have no regard for their mere beliefs. And that may rub some the wrong way. But I appreciate your call, and thanks for letting us all know that the phone lines are open and this person is likely dodging or just not trying very hard.
Well, maybe he'll call back and engage. I'm still trying to wrap my head around this Mangione thing. Because in my neck of the woods right here where I live in the Baltimore metro area and in Maryland, these people are very well known. I mean, I've spoken to one of them on AM Talk Radio. The first cousin of this, the first cousin actually has a seat in the Maryland State Legislature, and they own a piece of a local AM Talk radio station. This is not some obscure digital fiction they created. I'll use the term patsy, if you will. I know you think it's basically an actor, and he's probably in on it, but it's not like a digital fiction like Adam Lanza.
No, this is not a two-dimensional.
Real person.
He's not two-dimensional. He's not two-dimensional. Right. You go back, he's got his term papers, but it all fits the same story. It's like basically between his term papers and his manifesto, he's template. Right. He's a manufactured folk hero.
Here's the thing. I'm out there on social media looking on, by the way, Facebook and Instagram had a major outage in the last few hours, I guess. Have you heard about that? That's something we got to look at. There was a major outage at Meta, Facebook, and Instagram, one or two other applications. And I was looking at a map, and it was urban areas around the country. But back to the UHC shooting narrative, I'm seeing out there on social media all over the place, I guess MAGA supporters, or maybe not. Actually, I don't know who they are. Maybe they're leftists. You would say they were leftists. People are saying that they're convinced that this kid, that's all they're thinking of him, he's like 25, 26 years old, that he's being set up and manipulated in some way. I'm just seeing that all over the place.
That fell apart, though. That finally fell apart when he had his moment to yell at the camera. But no, actually, I see what you mean, though. Like, so what they've done is they've involved people in the hunt for the guy. They've made him sympathetic, and now they want to GoFundMe, get him out of jail.
Nobody believes the McDonald's narrative. Nobody believes that he would have had to show ID.
Wait, look, what do you think of this?
Buy something at McDonald's. Nobody believes
What do you think
that.
about this? What do you think about the timing of the release of Daniel Penny as this guy gets arrested?
That's synchronized. I agree with you. It's all about right-wing, left-wing balancing of. Daniel Penny is, I suppose, demonized by the left as having killed this poor, defenseless, homeless man. Jordan Neely, was that his name, allegedly?
Yeah, and think about that. The poor, mentally ill guy, victim of society, that fits the Joker template, the Riddler template.
Oh, there's no doubt. I'm listening to AM Talk Radio, and they're all talking about the jury acquitting this guy, Neely. But now, of course, Daniel Penny. But now, of course, this is the grifting aspect of it. Neely's family is now going to sue Penny. See, this is the pretext they're creating. Even if they wouldn't convict Penny in criminal court, but now what they're going to do is try to squeeze. They're going to say people, look what we can do to you. Even if you didn't commit a crime, or if the jury said you didn't do anything wrong, you didn't commit a crime, we could still take everything you've got in civil court by suing. And that's what Neely's family is doing. And that's kind of crazy. Can you imagine? Think about the audacity. I should use the word chutzpah, the Yiddish word chutzpah, this guy, Neely, was out there, homeless, probably filthy and diseased, and who knows what else. And his family never took responsibility for him before, but now they're going to try to take advantage of this situation to drag Daniel Penny into court and get a huge cash settlement. To think about the audacity of that. I can't imagine anybody sitting on a jury in that civil trial would want to give these people a dime, but maybe my thinking isn't.
It's all about his utility as a symbol, as a martyr. It's pretty much like vultures. They see the money, and it's all about ideology, and it's not about
symbolic. It's semiotics. It is all semiotics.
I mean, this is always the case. They always present a martyr, and then the other side says, well, this guy has 42 convictions. So one side sees a martyr, the other sees the criminal. And this is exactly how the shooter is. One side sees a martyr, the other side sees a criminal. Daniel Penny, same thing. This is
like with the Mangionis. They own, this is incredible. They're very well known. They're kind of popular here. Long time, sort of, mainstream, middle of the road conservative Republicans here in Maryland. Owned a Hilton Hotel at one time. I don't know if they still own that. But one of the commercial interests they own is something called Lorien Senior Citizen Nursing Home and Healthcare, Lorien Healthcare Systems, which is basically senior citizens assisted living homes. And there have been a few scandals associated with them. Come on, I don't believe for one instant that Luigi Mangione didn't know that his family was involved in a big way in the healthcare, or themselves involved in the healthcare industry.
Well, that could be part of that. That's the whole thing. His whole narrative is going to be built on this: that he had the privilege, he had everything, and he threw it away to take one for the team, for the cause.
It's Shakespearean, yeah. Shakespearean.
It is. Well, hey,
but you think he's an actor? Is that your?
Yeah, I think that the whole thing's an act, but this is an actor with depth. It's meant to be compelling, convincing, and it is working. But no, there's no universe in which
those of us out here are thinking somehow he's being manipulated, or they messed with him, or who knows what. We're just kind of making excuses for him. Is that right?
Absolutely. I would say it's A to Z.
Let me go, and we'll invite your other caller to call in and challenge you on the more generic question of why any fool would believe anything that this current media is telling us after all these years.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you later.
Exactly. Thank you for the call. Great points. Yeah, and if you're not skeptical of media at large right now, if you're not PSYOP aware, if you're not aware of special effects and predictive programming conditioning, you're just not paying attention. If you're not auto-hoaxing the MSM, you're not paying attention. You don't have the frame of reference. You're not informed enough to know what's real or fake. The best you can claim is to be a believer, and a low information believer at that. And that's really the main point of what we do here. It's really about getting more information, even if the information means you believe less, because we are separating from the world of subjective belief. Okay, so the caller isn't calling in for some reason. At least we got Lynn to call in. A great call. Appreciate that. I have my Uber gig, so I have to step out the door here. We'll continue this conversation tomorrow. This is Fepe Akbar.
With your deception, keep it real, that's a profession. Like the whole world is pretending, found the truth around the penguin. Get a gang on with a blessing, all the other gang is stressing. RPSC on a nesting, only real one's gonna get this. Fake ones don't accept this, they can miss the message. Timbuktu got bodies, yeah, find them in our wreckage. Auto host a message, squad are representing. Killing you with knowledge, yeah, the uppers getting dirty. Oh, you're so affected, cause we're so effective. Let go of your worries, yeah, the whole thing is a spitter. We got it and we get it, offering refreshment. Level up your conscience, yes, honestly the essence. This wave is uncontainable, facts are undebatable. You lanes are unrelatable, give a fuck about saving you. We could keep on playing you, you just keep complaining too. Game is unescapable, unless you're with the gang or no. Messing with the penguin, we're messing with the penguin. Messing with the penguin, messing with
still believe in stuff. Get a grip and show some evidence for your bold claims. We don't play no games. We stay relentless, exposing hopes against quick. The IPS are making an entrance. Busting doors down, cause now's the time for interventions that I mentioned. We're affecting so many men across the spectrum. We stand out from the crowd, we don't blend in. Steady gaining tremendous momentum. There's nothing close to resembling. Check the emblem, it's a penguin, not a gremlin. Just letting you know you're on an infinite plane, it's never bending. We strike like Tempin, killing all fears and breaking the tension. Got another Hawks army, digging deep in the trenches. Come and join in, be adventurous. Quit being so sensitive, forget the censorship. We ain't telling fibs. Messing with the penguin. We're messing with the penguin.